If you're a longtime viewer of the show, you've probably noticed that we've made predictions about 4 times this offseason, and we're making them again today after we've seen testing. It's our show, so we can do whatever we want. Welcome back to another episode of the Podium Pushers podcast with Justin and Brandon. We've seen cars on track in Bahrain for 3 full days of testing. We've got a little bit of a better picture where all of the cars line up on the grid, so we're making our final predictions going into the 2025 season. If we've made any more predictions, don't hold us to those, hold us to these, unless we got those other ones right too. Brandon, how you feeling?
I'm feeling great. It was an awesome test. Honestly, I feel like it was more exciting than it has been in years past recently, and it was fun to watch. And I'm just absolutely pumped for 2025 season, and testing has contributed to that excitement. So
A lot of things going on track during testing, but we had many teams holding their cards pretty close to the chest. So we don't know everything. We're still going out on a limb for most of these predictions. But before we jump in to our predictions, we've got a fan question. And if you want any of your questions or predictions featured on this podcast throughout the season, be sure to subscribe or follow us on all our social medias. We're about to be having race weekends left, right, and center, and we want you guys to get to be a part of those podcasts. So be sure you follow along. This week's fan question comes from @PVK_96_, who asked, how will Red Bull's pace compare this year to the car they had last year? I think it's going to be slower than the Red Bull at the beginning of the year, but hopefully a little bit quicker than where the Red Bull ended the season. The test really gave me no information on where I think Red Bull is. I still don't know where that car is going to be when it comes to the top 4 on the grid. It could be first, it could be fourth. I also think it will be faster in the hands of Max Verstappen than it will be in the hands of Liam Lawson. So I don't have a great answer for that right now. I'll probably have to wait at least 3 or 4 races into the season until I'm ready to see just where Red Bull's pace is.
yeah, it was a pretty interesting test for Red Bull. They completed the least laps out of any team with only 304, which is still a lot of laps. But you think about that, and they spent a lot of time in the garage. Does that mean that they don't understand the car? Um, you know, I don't know. We'll have to see. Truly, still a massive question mark with Red Bull and where they'll be. But maybe he will get another completely dominant season from Max Verstappen, and he'll rattle off 18 wins again. We'll see.
We made all these jokes about reliability, and then the least reliable team during testing still averaged over 100 laps a day. So pretty reliable this year. I mean, that's just how it goes at the end of our regulation. So maybe next year we'll see some more reliability woes. But as always, if you want your question featured, be sure to subscribe. Now let's jump into our predictions, starting with our podium pusher of the season. Before testing, I chose Carlos Sainz, and I'm sticking with that prediction after testing. Carlos Sainz is my podium pusher for the 2025 Formula One season. I expected him to have a great year. I didn't expect him to have the wonderful performance we saw in testing. He set the quickest time of the entire testing sessions. I think he looked great. I think Williams is taking a step in the right direction. I don't think Williams is going to obviously win the Constructors' Championship or maybe even be the fastest midfield team all year long. But I do think Williams is moving in the right direction. I think Carlos Sainz is set up to have a great year with that team and maybe even have a great future with that team as we start to look to 2026 and beyond.
Yeah, it was a fantastic test from Carlos and Williams in general. That is a great pick. Before testing, I had chosen Oscar Piastri to be my podium pusher of the season. Oscar had a good test. I feel like it was pretty low key. Like nothing that was super eye-popping or anything like that. And after testing, my podium pusher of the season is going to be Lewis Hamilton. It's my official prediction. Lewis just seems excited to be in red, excited to be racing at Ferrari. So I think he's going to have a great season. And Oscar just seems to be kind of in that same, second driver, not really showing off situation that he was in towards the end of last season. So I hope that I'm wrong for Oscar's sake, but I'm putting all my money on Lewis.
Yeah, that hype train of Oscar Piastri beating Lando Norris this season that we were in last summer, it has completely derailed. No, I feel like no one's talking about that right now. It's clear that there's still a gap between those two drivers. You know my reservations about Lewis Hamilton. All I have to do is see him show us that he can qualify well, and then I'll fully be behind it. So I'm gonna wait on Lewis. Still a good pick, but I am gonna wait and see what he does in qualifying in Australia before I can get behind that back marker of the season. Before testing, I said it was Isaac Hadjar, and Isaac Hadjar didn't have the best test, but I am gonna go ahead and predict Aston Martin as my back marker of the season. They did not have a great test. They looked pretty average at best. The car looked extremely hard to drive. Obviously, you would hope that Adrian Newey showing up to that team will help them develop that car some, but we know he's going to be focused on 2026 for the majority of the year. So I don't have much hope in Aston Martin this season. I know Fernando Alonso will get the most out of that car, but Lance Stroll might even get the least out of that car. I don't know. So I don't have much faith in them. I'm gonna go with Aston Martin as my back markers.
Yeah, it was pretty disappointing in terms of the test from Aston Martin, but you know, last day of testing was February 28th. Adrian started on March 1st. So we haven't seen Aston Martin with Adrian Newey on the team with the cars on track yet.
I think he
So
actually started on like March 3rd, so maybe those 2 days he lost might be the difference between Fernando Alonso's 33rd win and not.
they could be. We'll have to wait and see, but it was really disappointing test from Aston Martin. I think they'll be, as it looks right now, towards the back of the midfield this season. Before testing, I had Gabriel Bortoleto as my back marker of the season. I'm sticking with that. It was I think, a better than expected test for Sauber, but man, that car just looks slow and it looks really inconsistent. Um, they were fighting the car quite a bit, I feel like, in testing, and I think for just a rookie to go out there, it's going to be a tough season for him. I hope that he gets more than one season, so that when the team turns into Audi, hopefully they'll put together a better product. But we'll just have to wait and see. I think it's going to be a tough season for Gabriel.
Yeah, every time they showed a Sauber on board, they had to turn like 4 times just to get it to turn one. So that car looks super hard to drive. And this prediction is nothing against Gabriel. Let's just make sure everyone knows that. We think the car is going to be slow. Nothing against him as a person, a driver. Just think Sauber is going to be as slow as possible. So don't yell at us, please. Our driver's champion prediction before testing, I said Charles Leclerc. I would love to keep that the same, and like deep in my heart, I still want to pick Charles Leclerc. But after testing, I'm gonna have to go with Lando Norris as my drivers' champion prediction. McLaren look like they're in a league of their own. Granted, they didn't show us everything in testing. We're kind of just assuming that they have a little bit more over the one lap, but Lando Norris did put in an amazing long run session on day two. They look to be the class of the field right now. I do think they are clearly a step above Ferrari. So as it looks right now, I do think Lando Norris will win the 2025 Drivers' Championship.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy to watch that long run on the second day of testing. I also had Charles Leclerc as my driver's champion before testing, and I can't not do it. I can't not lean into the delusion. I think that Charles Leclerc is going to win driver's championship this year. Kind of putting all my eggs in the Ferrari basket here, but I think it's going to be a great year from Ferrari, even though they do look to be a step behind McLaren right now. Towards the end of the season last year, they were really up there at the front. We saw them get a 1-2 in Austin in person. And I think with Lewis there to help influence and develop the car, his knowledge is going to be a valuable asset to the team. So I think that will help them avoid kind of the mid-season slump that we're used to seeing around race 10, race 11, race 12 for Ferrari. So hopefully they can avoid that and Charles can win the drivers' championship.
I don't even think it's that much delusion. Like in my mind, they are the clear second fastest car. They were obviously faster than Red Bull and Mercedes over the course of the test. And I do think Charles Leclerc is probably a more talented driver than Lando Norris. So it's on the table for Charles Leclerc for sure. I don't want to write him off at all. And I even think Ferrari could be the fastest package at some tracks this weekend. Like it's not a half a second gap. Like they're not that far off. So you said it's delusion, but I don't think it's that delusional really. I gotta be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I just said it was delusion because I know that everybody else is gonna blame me up in the comments for saying that it's delusion. And you know what? If it's delusion, I don't even care. It just feels good to root for Ferrari.
Yeah, I know I changed it, but in my heart, I still want it to be Charles Leclerc. So if it happens, I will be happy. Constructors champions, before testing, I said McLaren, and after testing, I'm gonna keep it the same. I do think McLaren will win the Constructors Championship in 2025. They look like they have the fastest package, even though we said Oscar Piastri is still a step behind Lando. He's a great driver. Like that is an incredible driver lineup, very reliable driver lineup. I think they'll score points fairly consistently this year. I don't think they'll necessarily be taking an insane amount of points off each other or coming together and losing points. So as long as McLaren has learned from some of the strategy mistakes they made last year, I think the Constructors' Championship should come fairly easy for them this year.
Yeah, I mean, we got to remember with McLaren, they are the reigning constructors champions, and I think they learned a lot in how to fight for a constructors championship last year, especially towards the end of the season when Ferrari was getting close, um, and all that. But before testing, I had Ferrari as the constructors champions, and again, I'm just leaning into the delusion. I'm keeping it the same, going with Ferrari. I would just love to see them win a double championship. I think Fred Vasseur has that team on the right track. And I think Lewis, again, is going to be a very valuable asset and kind of helping the team understand what it takes to win a constructors championship, win a drivers championship, all that stuff. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to pick against them. I think that's the best driver lineup on the grid. Like we said, the car is not that far off. So maybe I misspoke by saying McLaren should win it easily because I do think Ferrari could and maybe should be right there with them. So it will certainly be a close battle for the Constructors' Championship this year. Moving on to our two push-in predictions. My first prediction is that Aston Martin finishes seventh or lower in the Constructors' Championship. I really don't have that much faith in that team right now. I think they had a very disappointing test. And, you say that Adrian Newey is coming and everyone is excited about that. But even if he does put some focus into this year, there's only so much that he can do on a car that he didn't build in the first place. It's like adding stuff onto someone else's design. It's not going to just be immediately the fastest car on the grid. How much resources does Aston Martin want to put into building an RB19 or versus focusing on 2026? So I don't have that much faith in Aston Martin. I don't have that much faith in their second driver either. So seventh or lower for Aston Martin is my first push and prediction. My second is that Kimi Antonelli outqualifies George Russell over the course of the season. I think that is an incredibly bold prediction because George Russell, as we know, is Mr. Saturday. But I was pretty impressed with Kimi Antonelli's one lap pace over the course of testing. I think he's a very aggressive driver. We saw it in his very first free practice in Monza that he has the ability to be one of the fastest drivers out there. But also, I think he will cross the line a couple of times over the course of the season. I don't think he'll have the same race pace George Russell does. So I think overall, George Russell will still have the better season than Kimi Antonelli. But when it comes to qualifying on Saturdays, I would not be surprised if Kimi outqualified George more often than not this year.
Yeah, I think Kimmy is a really exciting talent to be able to watch this year. I'm excited to see what he can do. We haven't really seen him. I mean, we saw him in testing. We saw him for like a lap and a half in Monza, but I'm ready to see him for a full race weekend to see what he can do on a Sunday for sure. My first prediction is about Williams. I'm predicting that they will finish sixth or higher in the Constructors' Championship. They really looked on it in testing. Their best testing time was like 7.5 tenths above their quali time in Bahrain last year, which I think is wildly impressive. I think the cars are getting faster, but to have that much of a delta, um, is a great accomplishment. So I think Williams is going to be up there fighting for points consistently, and I think they'll do enough to finish sixth or higher. And then my second prediction is that Red Bull wins three or less races. That doesn't seem super bold, but with how Red Bull's performed in the past, how good we know Max Verstappen really is behind the wheel of a Red Bull race car, I think that's still a pretty bold prediction. And if Red Bull is in the mix, Max is going to be up there fighting. So.
I mean, they were winning three races a year, even when they weren't fighting for championships. So that is a fairly bold prediction. We'll have to see what happens with that one. Not to put you too much on the spot, nor to overreact to testing too much. But right now, Carlos Sainz, 2025 podium, yes or no?
Yeah, I think it's possible. I mean, I think if something crazy happens, which we saw something crazy happen 24 times last year, 24 race weekends, something wild happened last year. I think it's totally possible for Carlos to be back on the podium. I don't know, maybe he gets another organ removed and he wins the race or something.
Yeah, needs that weight reduction. Still needs some budget cuts down at Williams. Got to cut back on the driver. I think it's possible. Maybe it won't be on pure pace, but if there was a consistent driver in the midfield to take advantage of some craziness, sure, why not Carlos Sainz? He seems well equipped for that, and he knows how to handle himself at the front of the grid too. So maybe is my answer. I know it's lame, but maybe. uh, but there you have it. That is all of our predictions before we start the 2025 Formula One season. Next week, we're predicting the Australian Grand Prix. We've made it. The off season is done. Formula One is back for real next weekend. Before we go, Brandon, what are your parting podium thoughts?
Man, it doesn't feel real that Formula One is back for 2025, but man, I'm so excited. Australia is a fantastic race. It's one of my favorites to watch, and I'm pumped that it's the season opener again. I think that track always has great energy, a great atmosphere, and it being the season opener would make it even better. So
Yeah, it's gonna be awesome.
I'm beyond excited.
It's been a while since I've predicted a pole position or a podium, so maybe I'm going to practice a little bit before we come back next week and see what happens. But thank you for watching or listening to another episode of the Podium Pushers podcast. As always, before you go, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, follow us, do all of the things. We would appreciate it. If you want to be involved in future episodes, follow us on social media. We appreciate each and every one of you guys that are following along for this journey. It is an absolute joy to talk about Formula One with you each and every week. We will see you next week for our predictions for the Australian Grand Prix. Until then, have a great day and God bless.
See you.